Hello, YouTube. You get super shy about this. Hey, welcome back. Today's video is of my one and only attempt at event 20.4 from this year's road royalty competition. It was 10 minutes max distance, which on paper I love. It's somewhere between a 2K and a 5K in terms of pacing. The faster your 2K, the further away I think from your 2K this would be. When I was talking to our athletes about how to pace this, the athletes that were in the 7 to 8 minute range for a 2K PB could pace this closer to that than those of us that were closer to the 6.5 minute 2K PB time. Obviously, if you're holding close to 2K pace for 6 or 7 minutes, that additional 3 or 4 minutes is an eternity. Whereas if your 2K is closer to 8 minutes, you only have, that's right, buddy, you only have a couple minutes left. So I paced it more towards 5K for a number of reasons. One, I didn't necessarily feel motivated to do it. And two, during my warm-up, I didn't necessarily feel all that strong, which is probably more so because of the first part, being motivated. So my only issue with this year's competition was that, at least in the men's tall overall, and at least at the top, let's say 10 to 20 placings in men's tall overall. And again, this does not necessarily reflect how the placings went in other categories, although I think it was pretty consistent. The placings were largely decided after week 1. Now here's why. There were 3 scores in week 1, but the way the scoring worked was you could only really focus on 2 of the 3 scores, and you had to sacrifice fairly significant placings on the third one. The 2K broken up into 5 by 400 meters, where you got to rest as much as you wanted. You could either have a fast overall 2K time and a fast 400, but your elapsed time would suffer, or you could have a good elapsed time and not take a lot of rest and probably sacrifice your 400 meter sprint time. Other than the top 2 scores, like Jason and Cam are so far ahead of everyone else that for the most part their scores were untouchable, and their placings weren't that drastic. But third and beyond, it really made a difference. And all of a sudden the gaps, because one of your scores or one of your placings could have you like 30th or 40th, the gaps all of a sudden between the leaderboard placings were enormous. And unless they were going to program more scoring opportunities, overcoming a 20 to 30 point gap between 1 or 2 leaderboard placings would be really impossible. And event 2 only had 1 score, and the top guys were, we were basically all in the same, we were all pretty close in terms of where we were ranked from week 1. So there wasn't going to be much change, maybe 1 or 2 points change between us. Week 3 there were only 2 scores, but again, you use Jason Marshall as an example. I think he was first on both parts on week 3. There wasn't the same issue as from week 1 where you could be fast on 1 or 2 parts and then have to sacrifice points on the 3rd part. So because of the week 1 scoring issue, basically the competition was over at that point. If you rode consistently for the rest of the competition, you didn't really move your ranking spot. I think after week 1 I was 3rd, and then after week 2 I was 4th. Could be wrong, I might have been 4th right off the bat, now that I'm thinking about it. And then that didn't change from week to week. I was roughly 15 to 20 points behind the guy in 3rd, Steve, and about 15 points ahead of Andy, who is in 5th. And those spots didn't change. Again, there wasn't enough scoring opportunity to make changes after week 1. If there were like 9, 10, 11 scoring chances, then maybe things would change. But again, some events would have had to be similar to the week 1 scoring in order for that to happen. If you take out one part of week 1, like if you take out the elapsed time, let's say, and you just focused on, or if you had like a set rests in that workout, it's a completely different leaderboard. If you have more events like week 1, it's potentially a completely different leaderboard. I'd be curious to know if you're listening to this and you did compete, if you noticed the same thing. A few people I've talked to all agreed, and this is why this week was largely irrelevant in terms of scoring. The people, just looking at, let's say, the top 10. The top 10, I'm guessing, won't change. I don't think there was anyone within a few points of each other where placing would really matter. Like, I messaged Andy on Instagram because I had posted early, and he had asked what my score was, and there was no reason to hide it and I told him, like, I only rode as hard as I needed to stay, 15 people ahead of you. And I knew he'd do well, and I knew he would likely beat me on this event, and he did. So I had to basically be within, I think 15 people. So if let's say he finished 2nd, I had to finish at least 17th in this event to keep 4th place. It is what it is. The right athlete's going to win this thing. Looking at who is involved, we can read this in a sec, buddy. Looking at the athletes that are involved and the way the placings worked out, I think it's pretty indicative of everyone's capacity, barring maybe a few people who got really hammered by that first week event. If you look at Marcos's scores, he suffered in week 1, and that really threw him back in the rankings. So I would suspect he would be in the mix at the top as well if he would have had a better first week. But overall, I think the rankings played out okay based on where people were at in their training, where people were at in the season. I'm sure Ollie would have probably done a little bit better if he hadn't taken a bunch of time off after Brick, but he managed to, I think, sneak into the top. I haven't looked, I should have this up. Pretty sure he's in the top 8 or 10. So everyone that should have done well, I think, did well. Our team obviously did well. This is the 3rd year in a row that would have won, which is one more erg in the Garage Athlete family. I think Jay's getting the bike erg this year. We'll see what happens. As always, I appreciate you watching as I finish the last few strokes on this 136 average 10-minute piece. If you haven't yet, feel free to like and subscribe.